Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, good Thursday, good week. Hello, we're back. We're live. It's all about you. We are here. My guest and I are going to have a wide-ranging and super interesting discussion. I'm tempting fate by sitting here with my legs crossed. By the time this is over, when I stand up, I could fall straight down again. You never know what will happen in this roller coaster of a show. We have a fantastic guest for you this week. You may have noticed that there was no episode last week. I was taking advantage of the public holiday. So we had a holiday here, and I know you had a short week in various other countries around the world. So we're back with the third episode in the fourth week of Let's Talk Security. Thank you very much for joining us. My guest today has been in the industry for many, many years. She is former US DIA deputy chief of cyber. She has worked in risk management at AT&T. She's an author. She's an authority. She's founder and CEO of MyConnectedHealth. She is Tyler Cohen Wood. Tyler, hello.
Hi, how are you? That was a great introduction.
I just made it up off the top of my head. Obviously not the facts. The facts are the facts, but I had no idea what I was going to say when we went live. That's the way I roll. Thank you for joining us. You're looking great.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And you too are looking great in your Motley Crue shirt. I like it.
The bad boys of Hollywood. Trying to make sure it's a different t-shirt for every broadcast. Thank you for noticing.
You're welcome.
So yeah, we have around about an hour to have a wide-ranging chat about everything and anything. Let's talk about you first. Let's set the scene. And audience, don't forget, I know and I can see from the comments coming in that you're joining us from all around the world. So thank you, first of all, for joining us again. Hope you enjoy the conversation. But don't forget, if you have any questions that you want to ask or any answers that you really need, this show is as much about you as it is about Tyler. So drop your questions in live and we will do our best to get through those as they pop up. So Tyler, let's talk about the present before we go back in time a little bit. Founder and CEO of MyConnectedHealth, yes. And yet cybersecurity professional. So what is MyConnectedHealth and what is the security angle there?
So MyConnectedHealth it's a global healthcare system that uses a different methodology with AI, and there's some other kind of secret sauce to really help bring together healthcare professionals and help patients with difficult to diagnose cases get a diagnosis, but also offer, it's a collaborative model. So doctors work in teams. There's a lot of things that make this different, and people will get diagnosed with this with this system.
And this is an early stage startup right now, right? Or am I?
Yes, yes. We are pre-funding. It is very, very early stage, but you know, things are really looking good, and there's a huge need in the market for this. So I'm really excited about it.
So you have a long and storied professional history.
Yes.
So maybe let's talk a little bit about your journey. I want to talk a lot about what's going on now in cybersecurity. I want to talk a lot about the current and future threat landscape. So we're going to dive into that. But I think it's important just to get a baseline to set the scene, if you like. So what was your journey? How have you ended up here, and why eventually, when we get there, why MyConnectedHealth?
Well, when I graduated, it was the late 90s, and we just didn't have it was cybersecurity back then. It really wasn't a thing. We didn't even have DSL. Well, actually we were about to have DSL, and I was way into music. I was a DJ. I worked for a record label, for a nightclub, and I was very into music, but I started kind of learning how to fiddle around with computers and take things apart and put them back together. And I really thought it was fun. So I moved to San Francisco, which at that time was, you know, the big .com boom, and got a job there, and then started moving from, you know, sysadmin positions up to security. And eventually I came to DC, and I've worked for the government for pretty much most of the time that I've been here. And I remember the last time these brood-X cicadas were here. So I was here 17 years ago. So it's really been a long time.
So you were at the Defense Intelligence Agency, right? And I'm, of
Yes.
course, I am well aware that there's probably lots of stuff, maybe most of the stuff that you can't talk about or won't talk about or don't want to talk about. Fully respect that. But it's to someone external, obviously I stand no chance of going to work for the DIA, mostly because of my nationality, probably because of my hair as well, who knows, but mostly because of my nationality. But so how do you end up in that kind of field? How do you go from being interested in being a tinkerer to being a sysadmin and then finding yourself at the DIA and working your way up there? Because I think that's a trajectory that a lot of people watching would be very interested in exploring for themselves.
Well, so, some of it was just persistence. When I first moved out to DC, I worked for the Department of Defense Cybercrime Center, their forensic lab, developing coursework for and scenario-based training for how to teach DoD agents how to respond to an incident and how to then do the forensic analysis of it. And I'll admit, I mean, it was kind of out of scope. I had been doing cybersecurity as a kind of a sysadmin, but this was a little bit different. And, you know, fortunately, I read everything that I could. I learned everything that I could, and I watched. And it turned out to be something that I was really good at, and I absolutely adored it. And I mean, it was very rewarding. And that sort of got me thinking that my mind works in interesting ways. I can think like a bad guy, but I'm not a bad guy. And I can think of like worst case scenarios. And that turned out to be really, really helpful, because when I moved into the lab from the training facility, into the forensic lab, and I was actually doing forensics and incident response, it helped me to investigate these digital evidence and think about it in a unique way. And you know, I was one of the first people that started talking about using iPods. We didn't have iPhones yet, but iPods to store digital evidence. And I showed how you could take an MP3 and just add a little bit of text in there as a hidden message. And I could, you know, show that that can be evidence. And there were all kinds of other crazy things showing, you know, just what the possibilities are. And
I remember back around the same time, must have been a similar time, I was an architect, security and privacy architect, and I was doing a lot of sort of 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning work in data centers, actually deploying the stuff that I'd been architecting. And of course, you know, the entrance to the data center, there's a lot of physical security, there's man traps, and there's phone confiscation. And that was the thing that made me laugh, is they would make sure they would take your cell phone away because it had a camera on it. Even back then, it had a camera on it, not a good one. And they don't want you taking photos of configuration screens and patch bays and anything else that would be handy intelligence. But of course, the one thing that you really want in the data center with you at that time of the morning, when you're working by yourself in that nicely chilled environment, is an iPod. And I remember laughing so much to myself, thinking, you know, they took my phone away, but I could basically steal the entire data center on my iPod. It's 160 gig of storage that I just need to plug in and start downloading stuff. It's amazing how, and for me, that was a very early illustration of how security policy and security thinking very often lags behind changes in the technological landscape and then the associated changes in the criminal landscape.
Yes.
So on that note, and that was a totally off the top of my head segue, but it works really well.
Yeah.
I should have let that go.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
On that note, so I mean, you've been doing this for quite some time. I don't want to age you, but you've been doing it for quite some time, and that's fantastic. You must have seen, hey, I'm older, and now I know when you graduated, I'm older. You must have seen a lot of changes in the threat landscape over that time.
Oh yes.
What have been the ones of most significance, do you think, for changing the game from a criminal perspective and changing the game, more importantly, from a defender's perspective? What have been the biggest changes?
Well, obviously, things have changed so rapidly, and I mean, I remember I thought that when IoT first started kind of coming on the scene, I was very concerned about the potential for using it as a threat vector to get into a business, and there's been so many of these changes. Social media obviously is one of the huge ones, but I think that the target attack that started in 2013 when it was found in 14. Did I get my dates right? I think I did. 14.
Which attack are we talking about? I mean, for me, the big one, yeah, target. Sorry, I thought you were talking about targeted, like as in APT target. You mean the attack on target? No, let's be totally clear. There are so
target many. The bullseye.
Yep. Yeah, that's kind of asking for trouble, right? Making your logo a bullseye is kind of like. Anyway, you were saying the target attack.
The target attack, because it changed the game, because the attackers entered through an IoT device. They used a third party's credentials and went in through an HVAC system and were able to conduct the attack that way. And to me, that was a huge game changer, because it was shortly after that we started seeing more and more and more of those types of attacks. So
yeah, and supply chain attacks have become a really big thing and a really big part of the cyber criminal modus operandi right now, right? I mean, I can obviously SolarWinds is the big one that everyone will cite at the moment because it's the most recent, but there are plenty of others, and there are plenty of really interesting proofs of concept. One of the areas that's particularly interesting to me right now, because technologically it's a big growth area, it's a big adoption area within enterprises, is cloud. What's your view on cloud threat and cloud security?
Well, there's pros and cons to anything. If you're utilizing a public cloud and you're sharing a physical machine with another entity, you remember a couple of years ago there was the attack on there was a BIOS level attack. Mm-hmm. And so, that's a threat vector. But I think one of the biggest threat vectors is when businesses are utilizing the cloud, they don't actually look at the contract, and that's a mistake. They don't necessarily know. And these are questions that have to be asked. If there is a security incident, where does my responsibility as a business begin and end, and where does the cloud providers begin and end? Because often, there is written in that you are in charge of your own security. So, and that's fine. But I think that it's a threat if you don't actually look at what your responsibilities are, and I think that's a big threat.
Yeah, and for me, what's really interesting is that if you look at threats that are currently successful in cloud environments right now, by far the greatest culprit or the greatest weakness is misconfigurations. The huge majority of successful attacks against cloud infrastructure are because it was poorly configured when it was rolled out. And you were talking about responsibility, the shared responsibility model, whether you move from infrastructure as a service, where you've got everything from the operating system up, or the further you kind of move to the right through platform as a service to fully abstract serverless or software as a service type infrastructures. The less control you have, the more responsibility you give away to your cloud provider. But the one constant, the one thing that you remain responsible for wherever you are on that journey, is the service configuration. And we're seeing that massively taken advantage of now for cryptocurrency mining. Obviously, people are trying to hijack your processing capability to mine cryptocurrency for themselves, but increasingly for theft of credentials, for theft of data. And I think that's going to be a real growth area.
It's a huge growth area. That one's huge. Can I go back to a question you asked?
You can go wherever you like.
You said, what are turning points? What have been some of the changes in the turning points? We're living in one of those right now. And because the amount of attacks on critical infrastructure that we're starting to see, that Colonial Pipeline, JBS, the New York subway system.
San Francisco a while back. Yeah,
I mean, there's been a ridiculous amount of attacks in solar winds in a very short period of time, and they're all ransomware, and they're targeted toward things that can be considered critical infrastructure, and it's a really complicated situation. And I think that there's more that needs to be done to really stop this situation. I mean, in terms of like, for example, in terms of the Colonial Pipeline hack, it was a compromised VPN password. Yeah. Well, AI has got a long way to go, but it's really good at what it does. And I would just make the assumption that it would be easy to make that determination of if a person is utilizing a device and they're always using that device to VPN in, there's an identifier. There's also a location affiliated with it. There's a profile. And if suddenly that VPN is being logged into by a completely different device in a completely different location, then that should be an alert. And
yeah, for sure. And for me, the Colonial one directly, that was even less complex to my mind. I mean, you're absolutely right in that there is a great security architecture use case around. I mean, that you're basically beginning to talk about zero trust as an infrastructure, as an architecture concept, right?
Yes.
But for Colonial, for me, that was a process failure. And I think while we definitely need to be looking forwards, and the US government is heavily into zero trust as a architecture to begin adopting right now, we also need to make sure that, and this is the perennial problem with cybersecurity, we need to make sure that we have the basics covered, right? That account that was used in Colonial, is, to my understanding, and I'm not an insider, but from what's been made public, that account that was used to attack Colonial is one that was no longer in use
right.
Within the organization.
Which makes it even worse.
Right. It should have been aged out. It should have been closed down. The account access should at least have been terminated, if not the account deleted, whatever was appropriate for that resource at the time. So for me, that's a basic process failing.
Yep.
And in the early days of ransomware against both individuals and organizations, a lot of the success of ransomware was built and established on failures of process, because we had neglected the basics in our scramble for the shiny and the new, I think, across the industry, right? And so I remember, when was it? Maybe 2016, when ransomware was kind of at its previous height.
2016.
Yeah, and that was when we were seeing a whole lot of new ransomware variants, and a whole lot of new threat actors, and a lot of the education that was out there at the time to help people come back from ransomware attacks was around backups, because people had neglected the basics of making sure you've got, following the 3-2-1 rule, making sure you got your backups, making sure they're offline, and people really learned from that. I think process improved, which is why ransomware threat actors have had to change their tactics and have had to change their tools and their capabilities, and why we see a lot more living off the land type attacks, why we see utilization of exploits of vulnerabilities where organizations may previously have looked at criticality and said, oh, this isn't, for example, remote exploitation, remote execution of code, so it's less critical to get it patched than these ones that I really need to take care of right now. Yes. Now threat actors are actively looking for, oh, this is a nice escalation of privileges vulnerability. Once I'm in, that's exactly the kind of thing I'm going to target. I need to escalate my privileges to be able to run PSExec or any one of the
Metasploit, whatever you're using, ransomware as a service.
Yeah. And the other great growth area, and I'd be really interested in your insights on this. And let's think a little bit about the future as well. One of the big growth areas right now, I spoke about cloud from a practitioner perspective, is the adoption of cloud within the cyber criminal world. So operating clouds of logs and charging per access for access to these clouds of logs for intelligence gathering purposes. But also the rise of the access as a service industry and the initial access vendors, the IAVs of the criminal world. We know that that's a source right now of information and access for current ransomware campaigns. Do you see that as a growth area for criminals? Where do you see that going?
I do. I see. Well, and let's also talk about phishing. We got to talk about phishing.
Yep.
I mean, the percentage of breaches that were caused by phishing, a successful phishing attack. I mean, it's I think, what is it, 95, 93% of breaches?
Of breaches, yeah. I mean, historically, it's been up there in the 90s. I wonder if we will see that number start to drop off. I think we will. As criminals move more towards this cloud of logs and initial access.
Right.
But
there's also a trend of utilizing AI to comb through open source information, open OSINT, and to be able to piece together profiles on people to be able to guess their passwords. And you know, the amount of information that is available. I'm not saying that it's just openly available. Well, OSINT is, but the amount of information is just astounding on people. And I think that, you know, one of the target areas you had mentioned, you know, utilizing cloud and then the logs, but also using AI to really get a good profile and be able to really emulate that person as best as they can, or trick them into some kind of phishing, whaling, BEC, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to talk to you about the future, but I want to just ask a couple more questions about the present. Future is a big thing with me, and I've got loads of stuff that I want to talk to you about. So we're gonna go into that. But I want your perspective on a couple of other things that relate more directly to the here and now.
Yes.
And the first is, why do you think? And certainly, you know, it sounds like a leading question, but it's not, because, you know, from people that I know, practitioners that are in the trenches every day, this is not a loaded question. This is a reflection of reality. Why do you think ransomware is at such epidemic levels right now?
The eclipse. I'm just kidding.
It happens.
It happens. No, because the ransom is being paid, and they're they're targeting things that are critical infrastructure that you kind of have to pay. And you know, it's difficult to go from backups. You can't have the Colonial Pipeline shut down for, you know, months on end. So and this is what is absolutely insane to me, is there's actually another business that's becoming huge, and they're called ransomware negotiators. And what they do is they're paid by the business to negotiate a deal with the criminals, and it's
fully legitimate business, right? That isn't even the criminal aspect of it. That's market economics and the capitalist system at work, right?
Yes.
The free market economy at work.
What concerns me isn't necessarily you know, that they got into the Colonial Pipeline. Obviously, that concerns me a lot. That wasn't the best way of saying that, but I see that as other nation state actors or hacking groups may see this and see what the reaction was, and you know, they're going to go after something maybe more, something that could be much more disruptive, like a water supply, or power grids, or it's going to escalate. And the problem with critical infrastructure is that we need it. We need it to function. And I mean, if you're attacking a hospital, you know, ransomware through the hospital, there has to be a better way, and we have to be better defenders. And I think that better way is preventative measures. And I think that we need to really think about how we're delivering cybersecurity awareness training, and maybe we need cybersecurity awareness training 0.3. And I've done keynote presentations all over the world, businesses, small, large, all over. And you know, one of the questions, you know, that they ask, well, they always want to talk about phishing, but when I noticed that when I would do presentations from the business side of things, saying, you know, if you get this type of email, or if, you know, you see this on your social media account, don't click because it could be an entrance into your business network. Well, I noticed that when I changed it to something that was more personal, that's when I think people tend to be more invested, because the techniques that you're going to use are going to be the same, but there's a very big difference to people if you say, yeah, you don't click on this because it could be an entrance into your business, and you know, you could get in trouble, and you got to be cognizant of all this, versus if you click on this type of link, or if you're posting all of this information and you're not using privacy settings, you could be putting your children at risk, or you could be putting your personal livelihood, your finances at risk. And it's the same techniques, but I think people are more engaged and more invested, and they want to be empowered. They want to have this knowledge, but it's just got to be delivered in a way that I think makes sense to people on an individual level.
You know, we had a similar observation at Trend a few years ago. One of the things that I do at Trend, which became an accidental part of my role, but I really enjoy it, is making films. And we were talking about, you know, you can make a film about something. Sorry, switch language. You can make a movie about something, just for the sake of clarity. You can make a film about something and impart a whole lot of information. But if your viewer isn't engaged, or if your viewer believes they already know it, even if they don't, then they're not going to take much from that. So we kind of switched it around and said, well, it's like with insurance, right? People don't take insurance because they believe something will never happen to them, so they let it slip, and then the house catches fire, and then they go, oh, I wish I'd bought that insurance. People very often within security can have that misplaced sense of safety within their corporate environment. I'm the best CISO in the world. I hire the best people in the world. I've invested in the best technology in the world. It's not going to happen to me. So we started to make interactive videos. We made a couple of them, which actually put you, the person being educated, in the driver's seat, and you watch a bit of the action stops, you make a choice, the action continues, like those old choose your own adventure books that I used to read as a kid.
Oh, I love those.
But in video, right? Because what you have to do is you have to let the viewer, let the person being educated make all the decisions for them to be able to realize at the end that actually I messed up. I was in charge and I messed up. There is something that I need to reconsider or need to learn.
Yes.
So with ransomware, there's been a lot of focus on it in the US very recently for very good reason. Colonial, I think, Colonial was the moment, but then, you know, there have been other ones, as there have been previous ones, and they continue to happen. So now you have, you know, the US administration talking about ransomware. It's a problem. And that great phrase, something must be done, using the passive tense, which is always a red flag for me. What and by whom? Those are my questions. What is the sea change, in your view, that is required, or what is the change in approach that is required to make a difference? Is it something to do with cryptocurrency? Is it something to do with the way that data is managed? Is it something to do with the way that security is architected? What is the sea change that's required? It's your chance to fix everything. Totally unfair question, but a good one. Well,
there's a technology that we're utilizing in MyConnectedHealth, and it's a different way of using the internet. it's kind of thinking like I don't know, some of my ideas, but they're great. I mean, they work. They sound like a crazy person, but just using things in a very different manner, which I wish I could. Next time you have me on, you know, we'll be funded, we'll be great, and I can go into the
talk about the secret sauce.
Yeah, but it's out there, but it works. But for right now, I mean, I think zero trust is a very good policy to have. I think it's a good thing. I don't know what the answer is. I co-host a Clubhouse chat on Fridays, and we've had this conversation numerous times. And some people say you've got to hold the C-suite accountable. You have to fines. I think someone mentioned jail. We all laughed, but and then all the way down to, should you hold the person who clicked the link responsible? And I actually don't know what the answer is there. I don't know if that would have an effect. It may make the situation worse. But what I think is needed, honestly, is a personal cybersecurity assistant that is with you on your phone at all times.
Giving you a quiet word in the ear. What about?
Well, yeah, think about it. If you're walking down the street and you don't have your phone configured, you have your phone configured to auto join Wi-Fi, and you walk by a coffee shop that has, you know, unsecured Wi-Fi, you're going to go on that network. But if your helper cybersecurity app said, "Hold on, you're about to go into an unsecured network. Do you want to do this? Now, this is why I would suggest you don't. Would you like me to fix the setting in there for you so that doesn't happen again?"
Yeah. Whereas right now we're relying on people to understand what all the arcane settings are that are hidden away within the interfaces of our devices, right? Which is
in cybersecurity people, and I mean, I'm one of them, but we see cybersecurity as much more important than the rest of the world. And because to us, we live in this world, this is what we do. We see these threats. We're constantly thinking about all the potential things that could happen to try to thwart them. But, you know, a lot of people, and I've actually asked, I asked about 40 friends who work in completely different arenas, various verticals. And I asked them, so how do you get the cybersecurity awareness training? You know, do you think about cybersecurity, you know, when you're working? And the response that I got from actually everyone was, no, cybersecurity just gets in the way. It keeps me from getting my contracts out. It keeps me from getting my job done, and it's a problem. And
or when it's done well, it's something that happens around me and keeps me safe. Not something to take an active part in, right?
Yeah. So I think that relationship has to change, because, I mean, we're going to become more and more and more cyber. When COVID hit and we went to a work from home environment, I mean, we went to living I would say 99.9% cyber life, relying on these, you know, digital devices and things to keep us safe. And you know, that's a huge adjustment. So
from just to close out on the ransomware thing, when I'm talking about what's the big sea change, what do you think of the idea of criminalizing ransom payments? Is that a great idea, or is that a really dumb idea, or somewhere in between? I tend to fall on one side or the other.
I've heard this one too, and you know what? In a way, yeah, sure, criminalize it. That would certainly stop it. But what if it's a hospital? What if it's you know, something else that's critical infrastructure that we're reliant on, and that people's lives are at stake?
Or what if it's the only option you have anyway, right? Then legal or not legal, you're still going to pay the ransom. And actually what you do is you generate the fertile ground required for yet another cyber criminal infrastructure to spring up, and ransomware brokers and money, digital currency laundering services, and everything possible to hide the fact that you paid a ransom because you don't want to go to jail. You don't want to face the legal consequences of it. So yeah, obviously that exposes what my view on the subject is.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot. For me, there are a lot of things that are required. We have to keep, as an industry, we have to keep banging on about the basics, no matter. And I used to get this, not frequently, but I've had it several times where people would come up to me after an event and say, "Why are you still talking about basic stuff? I came here to hear about, you know, the next new great big thing, or the most scary threat, or what criminals are doing today. Why are you talking to me about backups?" And the answer is, well, because you're still not doing your backups. So no matter how many times you've said a certain thing, if that is still one of the valid responses and one of the valid tactics to mitigate criminal enterprise, whatever that thing is, then we need to make sure that we keep talking about those things until they're done right. Stop being magpies of the cyber world and focusing on the shiny thing in the distance.
And there's also always the possibility that the ransomware is just a red herring, and what actually was going on behind the scenes is the hackers went into the machine, it went into a server, and they changed the data, because we think exfiltration of data or ransomware is like the worst, but it can be pretty scary when you think about manipulation of data, you know, changing levels of whatever chemicals in the water system, or in a hospital, you know, changing medications, or anything like that. It can be quite frightening.
So that leads on to the future. I mean, let's talk about what we know, where we are right now. We know what the problems are. We may not have all the answers. Otherwise, I guess, you know, we'd all be out of jobs if all the questions were answerable immediately and in a definitive fashion. So what about the future? We've moved as a society from a centralized workforce in an office with data center centric usage. That was difficult to say. Data center centric usage patterns. We've moved now, because of the pandemic, to a much more distributed workforce, working from all kinds of different places. Obviously, during the pandemic, that's been working from home. Post pandemic, it's going to be working from anywhere, I guess. And why not?
Probably, yeah.
So it's a much more distributed workforce. We're much less data center centric. We're much more cloud centric in terms of how we access and use data. What does that mean for near term? What is the new digital normal? That's why I called this episode the new digital normal. I remember now. What does that look like? And what do you think will be the areas of focus of the attacker? And therefore, where should we as defenders be looking?
Well, I think that a lot of businesses are going to adopt a, you know, sometimes come in the office, or, you know, a work from home policy. And because people are finding that it actually works. I mean, obviously there's pros and cons to everything, but so I think that a lot of the threats vectors are still going to be targeted, you know, toward the home system and the home network, and any security measures that may or may not be in place. But I do think that we're also, you know, going to be going back into the office, some people, although, I mean, when I think about the changes from COVID, it's astronomical in so many ways to just think about. And sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, but
go on a tandem.
There actually have been some kind of good things that have come out of this, and that's really collaboration. I have seen more collaboration in the cybersecurity arena than I ever have before. People are working together on problems, and they genuinely want to help. And you know, one of the other things is just the tremendous amount of innovation. I mean, even the mRNA, I'm not a doctor, but the vaccine, the way that it works is just, it's groundbreaking. And when you look at a lot of the online healthcare systems, and when you look at just how quickly we've adapted, and we've innovated with so much new technology that I really believe that we're witnessing what the next thing is going to be, and it's going to be a lot more digital.
So if we're saying that businesses effectively, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm paraphrasing what you just said. If we're saying
that, I went off on a long tangent.
I was listening. That's my job. Don't tell my wife that. She accuses me of never doing the above, which is true.
It's true.
See, now I don't know what I was going to say. No, paraphrasing you, what you're effectively saying is that businesses have been forced to innovate rapidly throughout the pandemic because of the changes in working practices. Yes. I guess what you're saying is that cloud adoption has been accelerated over the intervening 18 months of when our working lives were basically turned on their heads. So does that mean we've created new criminal opportunity? Have businesses been forced to innovate and adopt technology at a faster pace than we can expect them to learn how to secure it?
I don't know. I mean, if I was looking looking at the news and just this month, I would say that we're not winning this, but I think the potential is definitely there. And when you think about attacks on the home, if I were a criminal and if I were going to attack someone who's working from home, I would see if their kids were doing school from home, and I would actually go in through that vector. Mm-hmm. That's an easy one. It's an easy target.
Yeah. So taking that whole supply chain attack methodology, and what we've done effectively, I suppose, is broaden the supply chain to include, my kids' school, any other device on my home network, and of course things like the VPN gateway that is now seeing much heavier use than ever before. Although arguably, I suppose, I'm going to upset some people here, VPN is arguably a dying technology, and VPN is arguably seeing the end of its potential use case as a mechanism for securing access to the enterprise, let's say. Because if we have moved, and this is assuming that I'm
zero
right,
trust,
I'm going to do it all the time. Right, exactly. If we've moved to a much more cloud-centric usage pattern away from data-centric, then VPN has far less of a role to play in that cloud-centric world, which is why zero trust becomes such a recommended and rapidly pursued architecture, I suppose.
Oh yes, definitely.
So you said we had a conversation a couple of days ago, and you said, and let's talk about some real scary things. So what are those scary things? You have my interest and my ear. And don't forget, audience, you are at liberty to submit your questions about any of this stuff and anything that we haven't spoken about. We are here for you. Tell me about the scary stuff.
Well, I see what's happening, and I see different patterns, and I see potential. And one of the big concerns that I have, and I don't want to freak people out by this, because there are measures that could be taken to really safeguard something like this. But you have a lot of genetic databases that hold the genetics. I don't remember the names of all of them. You had mentioned what was?
Oh, you mean like the genealogy type resources, the genealogical, and the health based, where you can get your own DNA tested, spit in a bottle, and send it off.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, if that information, and there's also other methodologies for getting a genetic database, but if hacking into it, but if this information was compromised, or if this information was sold to a third party that maybe didn't have the best intentions, I mean, it wouldn't be the easiest thing in the world. And again, I am by no means a medical doctor, but I know cybersecurity and I know how threat actors work. And, one of the things that keeps me up at night, is aside from the cicadas, is thinking about if these databases are compromised by a nation state actor, you can easily create a bioweapon to target a very specific population. And you could either wipe out an entire population, or worst case scenario, create a ransomware like situation where you need to have the key or some kind of medical component that you don't know to be able to unlock what's happening to your body.
That sounds like an apocalyptic
sci-fi
novel.
It does, and these are things that concern me, because these are things that are in the realm of possibility, and it's quite frightening to think about.
So here's an example. My friend and fellow researcher, Vic Baines, at Cyberbaines on Twitter, if you're looking for someone new to follow, highly recommended, released a research paper actually at RSA. We had a joint presentation at RSA called Project 2030, which is trying to imagine the next 10 years of technological change and the associated societal change, and what opportunities that might present for threat actors, and therefore where the areas of focus should be for defenders. That's kind of in a nutshell, the point of the report. One of the things that always jumps out to people, we spoke in the report about the possibility of digital immortality. So over the course of the next 10 years, we begin to have AI representations of ourselves who we feed throughout our lifetimes. Maybe we have a daily conversation or a weekly conversation. They monitor all of your online activity. They learn how to be you, how to act as you. And when you die, they become you. So you're in the ground and they carry on online acting and interacting as you for, I guess, an infinite period of time. So you end up, and then obviously with advances in artificial intelligence, you're talking about these digital entities increasingly having agency, being able to commit criminal acts, or at least antisocial acts, if not criminal. So you end up with a situation where you have grieving relatives going to court to try to ensure that a dead relative is not switched off, or maybe trying to ensure that they are switched off. But then what you have on the other side of that,
I know where this is going.
Well, think about the possibility for ransomware, right? You rely on having this digital representation of someone who's no longer with you in your life still. What's the price that can be placed on access to that dead person? So yeah, digital representations of human and associated ransomware activity with that. Of course, we're also look at the kind of stuff that Elon Musk is involved with, Neuralink. Beginning to talk about being directly wetware connected within the next decade or so.
Implants. They're already using implants, that you put in the finger, and right there, the little grain of rice for credentials and identity management,
and for payment as well. I think.
And for payment.
Little Bluetooth implants. And the other thing to me is think about what we've already seen over the past even 5 years, not 10, with GAN-generated, AI GAN-generated humans, and the possibilities for animation and real-time animation of existing or never existed human representations, video and audio. Think of a future when the whole population becomes desensitized to that, because movie stars license out their likeness so they can appear in 7 films at the same time and get paid 7 times for doing it.
Wait a minute.
Politicians do it.
Can this walk the dog for me?
Wouldn't it be cool? But still, as a population, we become desensitized to what's real and what's not real. We lose our ability to tell the difference. Think of what that means, and with your background in defense intelligence agency, think of what that would mean for influence operations of the future, when you can't tell if it's a real person or not a real person, and you can have an interactive communication with that person. What would the Facebook campaign of the future look like when we're talking about these kinds of people? Scary thought, right? Sorry.
No. I just realized that you have just as scary a mind, if not more so than mine, and it's awesome. But it's really scary. It is disturbing. But you made me think of a question. How are these online versions of yourself being created? Are they being created by information that you know, an entity like what's like Google or Facebook or whatever may have. Is that what they're basing? Is that what they're using to base it on?
Well, I mean, it doesn't exist, right? So it could be one of many ways. If it's your own representation of yourself, then arguably you would be in control of it, and you'd be using probably a cloud backend, right? You'd be feeding it with data, and the cloud backend would be responsible for creating the digital entity from the data collected. But if that backend exists, if the technology exists, then why would criminals not be doing the same and gathering open source intelligence to create their own version of you for targeted attacks? We have a question that just came in on Twitter, playing on the title of the episode. Are extortionist ransomware attacks expected to be the new normal? Do you think that's going to continue into the foreseeable future, or do you think we're going to hit peak ransomware and drop off?
I'm going to try to be optimistic here. I do think that just based on what I've seen in the past few months, that it will be the new normal for a while. But I believe strongly enough in the security professionals that are out there and the businesses out there that are that what they do is security, and even, you know, within the government, that we will have to have some kind of resolution to this, because I think it's very disturbing, like I said before, that there is an entirely new business cropping up that is extremely lucrative to be a ransomware negotiator. And just because of that, that scares me, that it's that lucrative.
Yeah, that it becomes a fertile ground for other people to make money that then begin to rely on its existence, its continued existence.
But at some point, there's going to be something, an attack that I hope it doesn't come to this, but it may come to an attack, a ransomware attack that is so horrifying that something is done about it, and that you know, we really, people start really taking it seriously. Yeah.
I mean, to me, I can think back through the history of ransomware. It bubbled under. I mean, the first ever ransomware was delivered on 5.25-inch floppy disk. It's that old as a threat, right?
Really?
The very, yeah. It was called the AIDS Trojan because it masqueraded as a digital interactive quiz to assess your likelihood of having been exposed to the HIV virus. Yeah, 5.25-inch floppy sent out.
I remember them.
They were so it's that old. Has that kind of pedigree, and then it went through, you know, screen lockers and mobile ransomware and mobile screen lockers, but it never really took off until cryptocurrency really enabled the payment ecosystem. So to my mind, the answer doesn't lie in oh, and I skipped a bit. We did hit peak ransomware in about 2016, and then it rapidly declined. But what was happening is that the threat actors were rethinking and reconfiguring and regrouping and coming up with new targets and new tactics, which they very successfully did. And that's where we are today. So it is definitely possible to hit a peak and for it to go away. If you wanted to go away forever, to my mind, the only long-term potential answer is not criminalizing the payments themselves for the reasons that we already spoke about. It's removing or stripping the anonymity from digital-based currencies.
Or we just rebuild the internet and make it more secure.
What you've got to do is give law enforcement the possibility of following the money, which previously was a very successive investigative tactic.
In the Colonial Pipeline hack, they did actually recover some of the money, which that's a huge start. If
it's a big step,
it's no longer profitable. And I mean, some of these attacks, have you heard of virtual kidnapping? I mean, this is horrible on families. And I know we're running low on time, so I'll be very quick. But you know, what happens is someone calls like a parent's phone and say, hey, I've got your kid and I've kidnapped them. If you don't send this amount of cryptocurrency by whatever, I'm going to kill them. And, oftentimes those they're false, and there's things that parents or people can do. Keep the person on the line. Ask if you can speak to the person while someone else is trying to reach your actual loved one, or like your child. Because maybe in dance class and they answer, say, "Hey, no, I'm fine," and then you just know it was an attack. But it's the creativity is just quite astounding.
So, like you said, we're close to the end. So I want you to give you the chance to finish on something uplifting or something. It's very easy to be dystopian and
I know, and I'm so sorry I did.
And tell the worst stories. I'm equally guilty. Hey, I'm the digital humans guy over here.
You know what? It's the eclipse.
So we spoke about COVID, and this is a question I've been asking everyone so far, and it's a chance for you to be uplifting at the end, as well as a chance for all of us to learn. We've all had very different experiences throughout all of our different lockdowns. We're all in different countries. You've had different levels of exposure, different levels of lockdown, different levels of effect, and so on and so on. But what we all have in common is that we have all had the potential to learn from this experience. And I don't mean that stupid question of what have you been doing with, I learned 3 languages and how to do yoga.
I learned how to play the cello.
Right. I don't care. But what I really do care about is, what have you learned from this experience? Why is the world different for you now than it was at the beginning of last year?
Well, in 2018, I got sick, and I got really sick. And knowing what I know now, I realized I was actually sick before, but I was incredibly sick. And I went from doctor to doctor. First they said it's infectious colitis, and I started seeing these, going through the system and seeing these doctor silos. And, we even went to one of the most reputable hospitals in the country. And, it just was the same thing, where the endocrinologist can't talk to the GI, or, I would get the answer, well, yeah, I don't know what this is. I've never seen anything like this. You should go back to that doctor. And I continued to get sicker and sicker and sicker. And for people that are ill, not having a diagnosis is probably the worst thing in the world, because you're sick. You can't tell people what's wrong because you don't know. And there's almost a sense that people don't believe you, especially if you have what's called an invisible disease, where people look okay. You don't look sick. And I wanted to do MyConnectedHealth in 2019. It was different then, but no one in the world wanted a system like that in 2019. They just didn't. And then when COVID happened, I said, I'm doing this system because it's going to save millions of lives. And, it may help me, it may not, I don't know. But I knew that I had to prove that what I call my human logic statements that would go into the system, that it would work. So I actually used my own case data, and I ended up diagnosing myself with something that only 300,000 people in this country are known to have, later confirmed by doctors. And for me, that was huge. So I went from being very sick and not knowing why to having an answer and wanting to give other people that same that same closure, or that opportunity to know what's going on, and know how to fix it, because everyone deserves that. Yeah, everyone deserves healthcare.
Yeah, without doubt. And we promised ourselves we weren't going to go into politics, so let's not go down that road. But I fully agree.
No. This isn't politics. This is just me having lived through a bad experience, but because the work that I did at DIA, the work I did at DOD, I look at things very differently, and I've built these complex systems that work, and that's really what this is. So whether it can help me, I don't know, but I do know that it will be able to help like millions of other people in this that are in a similar situation. I think there's 1 in 13 Americans that are undiagnosed. And that's really what I want to do. Is I want to make sure that I want to leave this. I want to build this so that other people have that opportunity too.
Fantastic. Tyler, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us on Let's Talk Security. If you want to follow Tyler on Twitter, it's at Tyler Cohen Wood. Am I right?
Yes.
So LinkedIn, go find her there. My Twitter thing, I never point in the right direction. One day I'm going to get this right. My Twitter thing is just there. Look.
Oh my gosh.
So you can follow me too. Tyler, thanks so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I hope that we can speak again.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
See ya.
Thank you. Bye.
There you go. Another hour of your lives gone by. Another, I hope, enthralling and interesting episode of Let's Talk Security. I'm not going to take up any more of your day, but I will be back next week for the final 2 episodes of this season. I am focusing solely on practitioners, people just like you, people in the trenches, on the front lines, doing the job. So don't forget to tune in next week. Please come and join us. In the meantime, I'm Ron Burgundy. You stay classy. See, you stay classy, and I had this really great smile. It was due for a really good ending, and then, you know, I did press the wrong button. Anyway, see ya.